Over the past couple of months, you've approved contracts with Train for all the HVAC equipment and controls on the connector. This is their sort of report card. Their contract's at $488,000. We don't currently have any issues with procurement on that end. We expect to get the equipment in time. Upcoming contracts that you'll be seeing shortly, we'll have a classroom furniture contract. We intend to have that done to capitalize on some fixed pricing we have with them. We will also be moving forward trying to select some office furniture and public area furniture. We'll get those contracts in front of you. They may all be one contract and maybe separate contracts for you to determine. Moving on to East and Central, that's the next project that's currently in the bidding phase now. I show you this only to tell you that there's a lot of moving parts on East and Central right now. I'll go through them in a little bit more detail. The design phase is about 90% done. They owe us documents. We actually pushed the documents from 11/8 to 11/15 to give them a little more time. So we'll push the addendum date as well. These dates are a little out of date. The GC solicitation has been taking most of our time recently. We decided to go a different route this time. Instead of going straight to the market, open to all GCs, we decided to pre-qualify the general contractors in an effort to make sure we were getting a good fit. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been advertising in the newspapers and on the Normandy Schools website. The RFQ went out on the 25th of October. We got the responses back on the 5th. We reviewed them on the 5th and 8th. And we made a recommendation yesterday, and we sent out award letters, or actually letters of qualification today to 4 contractors. There were 7 respondents out of the, we solicited over 20. We got 12 that were going to respond. 7 actually responded. 5 were shortlisted, and 4 were selected. So we now have 4 confirmed bidders for the East and Central project. We have an outreach meeting on Friday to bring all of our subcontractors and suppliers that want to attend and meet those GCs. We have a list of 40 or more that we've been communicating with pretty regularly on these projects. They'll come out Friday and have an opportunity to meet those 4 GCs. We feel like this class of GCs we're in now has a much longer track record of working with MBE and WBE firms and working on projects with workforce requirements. So we expect better results. Bid documents are actually coming out on 11/15. The bid date's been pushed a week as well. So the notice to proceed will push a little bit. The other section of work that's happening right now is abatement. So parallel to construction, and we're actually a little bit ahead of us, we need to get the abatement firm in to take out the hazardous materials. So happening kind of in conjunction with the general contractor solicitations has been abatement firm solicitations. They actually had a pre-bid walkthrough today, this afternoon. Their bid opening is the 16th, that's next Tuesday. We are requesting a special called meeting in order to get that approved and under contract so the work can happen over winter break in East Hall. There is a 10-day waiting period for that work to start. So that's why we're asking for that special called meeting. If we waited to the next board meeting plus 10 days, we'd be well into January. So pending and upcoming contracts on East and Central, looks a lot like connector. We'll have the abatement contractor coming soon, the general contractor coming soon, HVAC equipment and controls, that'll be through Train again, and then classroom, media center, and public area furniture on that project as well. So with all the moving parts, we've been concentrating a lot on phasing, particularly looking forward to how we're going to get the contractor into East and Central. Been meeting with Dustin Stockman and the rest of the team to coordinate these items. Essentially, we're in the process of opening West, which gives us some rooms to move folks out of North so we can empty East. I won't bore you with all the details, but there's a lot of moving parts. Packing, moving, abating, demo, renovations, and opening. Over the summer, we'll ramp up. We'll move into Central. We'll move Central equipment out. We'll start abatement there and do the renovations as well, while we wrap up East and move furniture and staff in. So this schedule kind of goes through those steps. The green items are breaks in the school calendar. The orange and purple items are our projects. So we worked through this with the district staff. We have a bit of a pinch here at winter break. We're only bringing 11 classrooms online with West going offline, or with West coming online, we're getting 11 classrooms. but by taking East offline, we've got 25 classrooms coming out. So working with Dr. Stockman to really try to find creative ways to find teaching spaces. I think we have a plan. As we roll into the spring semester then, the benefit of bidding West and Central together, or sorry, East and Central together, is that the contractor can plan and purchase equipment and materials for East in preparation for that summer push. So it'll give them a head start. Hopefully they'll have things ironed out, have subs and contractors, subs and suppliers waiting. So when summer break hits, we can start Central and knock out as much as we can. Currently, the goal is to get Central second and third floor open. Obviously, if we can get the whole building open, that'd be great, but we're predicting just the second and third will be available. But with a number of classrooms that'll come online by the end of the summer, it'll be more than enough for high school. And then again, remember the connector lags. The connector is the last project that gets done. It's starting now, but it'll actually finish last. Last item, and then I'll let you get back to your business. Wanted to tell you about our business utilization, give you a quick update on that. The summary is here. Your goals for MBE business participation is 25%. We're currently at 32.3. Your goal for WBE participation is 5%. We're currently at 1.06%. So talk about that in dollars. MBE firms currently have been under contract for $1.766 million. That's 32% of the overall money that's been contracted. The firms are listed here if you're interested. WBE firms have gotten over $58,000 of contracts. That's a little over 1%. We'll continue to push for improvement in those areas. With that, I'll open it to questions.
Any questions? Sheila, you have any questions?
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts, but I thought that in a previous meeting, we had already contract for the abatement.
So we did abatement in West, and then we did some abatement in Central last summer. Oh, yeah. So we only removed floor tile. There's actually above ceilings that contain asbestos, and there's a lot of pipe above those ceilings. And since the ceilings in Central were fairly new, we didn't want to get into that last summer. We were trying to get ahead of the game on the things we could get without impacting the student learning environment as much as we could.
Okay, now the other question is you say we'll continue to push in those areas. I mean, what does that entail?
With regards to like the north end of the building? Oh, so part of the reason to go the RFQ route on East and Central was to get into a class of contractor that has their established track record of working and attracting minority and women-owned firms. We were hearing directly from subs and suppliers that we work with on other projects that they weren't going to bid to some of the contractors that were coming to our pre-bids. So, you know, I know for a fact when we bid the connector, one contractor that I trust very much only bid to one of our eligible contractors. We wanted to see that number increase. So part of the scoring on the RFQ that we did for East and Central was to look specifically at their track record for M and WBE participation and even workforce. Workforce is a little bit newer of a requirement, but we did actually see fairly good reporting from the folks that turned in qualifications.
Ron, do you have any questions?
Actually, they were answered.
Okay. The only comment I wanted to make, I know there's lots of moving parts, and I know you talked about moving 25 or so classrooms. And the one thing that I'm very sensitive to is making sure that we stay close to our deadlines when it's involving children, because we need to be able to return their spaces to them as timely as we can, because I know we had challenges with the cafeteria, and I hope that, you know, when we start working on the spaces involving children, that we don't have those same challenges. So just be sensitive to it starting out, that we don't want to have those same kinds of conversations that we had around the cafeteria. Tony, you got anything? Sarah? Mallory, you got anything? All right, thank you very much. Next item up is 8.02 monthly financial update. Phil, the floor is all yours.
Good evening. My name is Bill Pusateri, Chief Financial Officer, Associate Superintendent. Nice to meet you. Welcome, Ms. Pack. Hello, board members and community members. Tonight, I'm going to go over federal money. We try to talk about that about once a year, just to give everybody a kind of a full picture of that and some of the dimensions therein. We have a good amount of money coming to our district that's federal. So we recognize that as different from taxes, local money, and state money, basic formula money. They're listed here in descending order of the items that are budgeted or to be budgeted for this year. And I think that's in your, there should be a paper packet there. Many grants, we see approaching 20 million budgeted for this year. We're also keeping our eyes on upcoming legislation. We know that recently the $550 billion infrastructure bill is on its way to the president for signature. It's important to note that there was $100 billion for school infrastructure in earlier versions, and it is not in the current version. Also, the Build Back Better for $1.75 trillion, that still lies ahead for Congress, but the school infrastructure is not tied to that anymore. However, right now, federally funded universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds is still alive. So there's still a long way to go before we get there, but that's something we're keeping our eye on. Sometimes there's related to this federal money that we need to monitor. There are special rules that we need to follow. One of them is to make sure we're engaging the community on the ways that we are spending the money and our plan for COVID mitigation. I just wanted to let you know that we continue to reach out to the community. We attended the October meeting, one of the October meetings of the Wellston City Council, and invited members there and community members to give us feedback on our ESSER plan and our Return to Learn plan. We will cover that in December with our NEA meeting among the committee leaders, and there will be a family survey going out from the communications department in the coming months and weeks as well. I want to take this opportunity for any viewers, if they do want to give feedback on our Return to Learn plan or our ESSER spending priorities, to go ahead and reach out at the email on the screen, info@normandysc.org, or just call the general number and ask to talk with us about giving us feedback, and we can set up a time to walk you through it. Another requirement of federal funds is something they call comparability. Every year, DESE measures our ability to give kind of equal resources among our schools. There's 3 ways that they measure it: dollars per student, certified teacher salary per student, as well as certified teachers per student per building. There needs to be about a 10% variance above the mean, above or below, and that shows that they're comparable. We do well in that. Most of our buildings are comparable, but it's something we still monitor each year. In addition, ESSER 2, with the about $13 million that's coming with ESSER 2, requires us to have what they call maintenance of equity. And that means that we need to make sure our highest poverty schools see an equitable increase or decrease compared to the other district schools. And I wanted to share some of that comparability data with regard to dollars per student. You can see in general, our dollars per student by building is going up this year compared to last. Last year, we only had 20% of our students approximately on site. So our costs were much less. The need for subs, the need for building cleaning, the need for food service was much lower. But this document can give you kind of a snapshot of where we're doing now with dollars per student spending. Some things to think about: buildings with a unique program, they spend more per student. So we think about the preschool and high school and CASA. Buildings with lower enrollment, they have less efficiencies, so they spend more per student, and Belnor would be one of those. If a building had an enrollment decline, they would typically see an increase in their dollars per student. If buildings had a large enrollment increase, they would typically see a decrease in dollars per student. We can see here Barack Obama had a large increase from last year to this, as well as CASA, as well as the high school and the early learning center, where Lucas and Washington have actually seen some decreases. And when we look back at the dollars per student, there's a correlation. And one more graph just showing the enrollment per building from this year to last. There are many dimensions to a federal program's oversight and federal funding. In 2018, we dissolved the federal program's grants coordinator position and assigned those responsibilities to multiple departments. And right now we oversee those among different cabinet members. Some major responsibilities include the business office oversees federal finance, tiered monitoring with DESE, as well as non-public school funding. Curriculum instruction oversees the 21st Century After School program, as well as an annual assessment and committee meetings with community members on academics. Human Resources oversees the teacher certification requirements, as well as notifications to families, and Support Services oversees the annual Title I meetings. Tonight has been a focus on federal funding and how we deliver that. Are there any questions or comments for tonight?
Ms. Williams, any questions?
No questions, but I'm happy to see the community engagement with the
Ron, any questions? No questions. Tony? No questions. Sarah?
Just one question. So could you talk a little bit about our DESE teacher recruitment grant? So it says the application is in January, but what are the rules around that?
DESE has, for us, we're eligible to receive $240,000, and we can spend that over multiple years. It's due in January. Ms. Jameson is leading kind of the way on ways we can align the revenue coming in to some of the notions that the HR department and that all of us are doing to try to recruit quality teachers. And we met once, and I know you're working on it. I don't know if you wanted to add anything now or, yeah, but generally we look for alignment. And so there's many pronged strategies to recruit quality teachers, and we look to see what we can do to build on that with these external additional funds.
Is just any expenses associated with recruitment we can get reimbursed?
Generally, there's a list of about a dozen allowable methods, and advertising, it works, community events, dinners and hosting events, to my recollection off the top of my head, supporting teachers as they strive to become certified if they're not, or if they're certified to gain it. I believe referrals is another aspect of that as well.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Are we any questions? Okay. All right. Next, we have 8.03, which is a presentation from Larry Hart and Associates. Good evening.
We appreciate the opportunity to visit with you this evening. With me, I have the Vice President, Abatement, with our firm for 9 years, and Senior Analyst, Erin McManus, she's in her 4th year with our company. They will participate to some degree. Our main objective is to try and help the collaborative board understand the philosophy that our firm had through the 28-year relationship that we enjoy with the district, and how we believe it was beneficial to you. And we're going to try and walk through that. You have I believe the PowerPoint on your computers. We will follow that page by page. We might jump around slightly, but we'll try to stay focused. And if you don't see where we're at, or you want us to clarify it more, please interject that. It would be probably helpful to everyone. The firm is celebrating our 30th anniversary Friday, November 12th. We celebrated prematurely in Kansas City strategy that was initially developed back in 1998. And this first slide details some of the things that we were facing. The district had a low debt service fund levy at that time. Debt service fund is the fund that brings in the money to repay your bonds, your general obligation bonds. And that levy was somewhat low back in those days. The growth in assessed valuation was slow back at that time. It wasn't as robust as it's been the last 2 or 3 years. But Brad's told me you grew about 30 million in assessed valuation from 2020 to 2021. The other thing that we were faced with was there's no state aid or federal programs that provide money for construction of school facilities. So the fact that it was, whatever improvements we would make in Normandy, we would do it on our own. We sort of have to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps with GO bonds. And the bonding capacity as of 98, April 98, was $18,140,889. So the facilities needs, that was a study that had been done for the district by architectural firms, it was over $200 million of needs. This is back in 1998. So what I did with LJ Partner Company is we tried to figure out how to attack this problem. And we decided that we would, that's on the next page, but let me have Aaron go through the difficulties that are there and what was actually done, still on the first page.
Yes, so with that last bullet point, we listed out each of the bond issues that were passed in the general purpose. So back in 1998, $17 million was dedicated to this crossing. April of 2004, $16 million was approved for various high school upgrades, including HVAC. 4 years later, in 2008, $23 million bond issue was approved for Abatement Elementary. In April of 2013, $7 million was for technology upgrades. In April 17, $23 million was for early childhood. And then just this past year, $6.5 million for high school upgrades. So of that $200 million originally identified, about $112 million has been completed.
Shift to the next slide. The plan to attack this situation was to preserve a strong revenue, maintaining and increasing the debt service fund level. It wasn't large enough to pay off the debt at a very rapid rate. The second part was whenever there was a bond issue to be sold, that we would try to have reoffering premiums so that we would raise more money than just the par amount of bonds. An example of that with the 3 sales that took place in 2017, 18, and 19 on that $23 million package that we used primarily for early childhood. Those premiums were over $5 million. The next one was to try and take advantage of any government programs that might exist. And at that time, there wasn't any funding for construction, but the federal government did have zero interest qualified zone academy bonds and zero interest qualified school construction bonds. Normandy participated in $9 million worth of that program, pretty much tied for the largest participation throughout the state of Missouri in that program. It's a fair amount of work to go through all the hoops that those programs require, but it saved $4 million or so of interest bill. I'll report that in a second. The other part of the strategy was to issue financings with short-term repayment plans, because you're bringing in more revenue, we can pay the debt off faster. And also, we can take advantage of lower interest rates through refinancing. This required ongoing monitoring and of the debt service fund and frequent visits with the staff to implement the recommendations that we would have at least annually. And as I said, this is a successful debt service management program. We accomplished $112 million of the original 200. Now, I would say, in all of you, probably your first thought is that 200 million is already not enough for what was identified back in 98. It costs more now than it does. So it's a difficult target to keep up with when you don't have any outside assistance. Brad will go over 35 million.
With historical adjusted levies by fund, just as Larry mentioned, the debt service fund levy and how that back in 2000, 2001, which was 76 cents, and now it's gone up over $1.02 to about 78 cents. And that's something we continue to monitor with those short call features and dishes, pre-fundings, prepayments, to keep that levy in place, or perhaps if we can all continue to grow, or we can grow instead of valuation going from 270 million to 300 million, over 330 million. If your Hancock kind of keeps rolling back your operating fund, we could perhaps wrap a few more pennies into the debt service fund as we've done through the years, just to keep that debt service fund level where it needs to be to accommodate future facilities needs that are nice.
Just to give you an example, if you take the current levy of $1.78 and go back to fiscal year 03, 04, where it was 82 cents, that brings in almost $2,300,000 more revenue to pay costs off. So that was the idea of boosting that service levy. At one time, it's no longer true. Normandy had the highest debt service fund levy of all schools, so it enabled you to retire debt as fast as possible. Right now, there are 2 or 3 other districts that have higher levies, but we're still on the top here, which is working to the long-term advantage of that.
And on the slide, I remember election analysis. So you'll notice those circles at the top. The number in each of those circles represents the voter approval for each election dating back to 98. So those first 5, you'll notice passed with approval percentages ranging between 60 and 70%, all with a large number of surplus votes. And I also included the last 2 previous elections from this table. You'll notice the Proposition D passed with 34 votes, and Proposition T was about 550 votes short. Table at the bottom, I included the first column, the voter turnout. So we see about 16% this past April, going all the way up to 24% back in 2004. So again, that's just something that LJ Run Company really supports you through each election and planning that goes into those. And I also did include that new addendum, more detailed overview. That's
On the next slide, we have the history of district's finances and noted various lengths of call features. That's the unique thing about our departments. We have those short call features of 5 years or less on the financings. You'll note that that's very common throughout the district. Many of the financings are even shorter than 5 years, some only 3 years, compared to the most recent financings that were issued. One was uncallable, one was 7 years. The thing that's on the horizon is refundings of the 18 and 19 bonds. They will become callable 1 year from now, 2 years from now, perhaps sooner if advances refundings come back to the full refundings, how much is refundings versus based on the growth of the valuation, and we got other findings in that is prepaid state additional.
Just to interject, in order to implement the overall strategy, it was important to have a call to that, because we didn't know at the beginning how much revenue would come in from the higher levies. So in order to keep those levies in place, we couldn't allow debt service fund balances to become excessive. So it was important to have debt that was issued to be called in a reasonably short period of time, or with the call, we should also be able to refinance. So those were parts of the whole long-term strategy, and you'll notice the total savings from the refundings and prepayments was $12,674,000, which is a considerable amount. That's money that then allows that's a revenue to support new projects without raising tax, which is then also part of the election success story.
So we have an annual principal rebate where the new money bonds issued through the years from the previous 26.5 million new money bonds issued in 2021. And so you can see overall, it's a very healthy situation with a lot of bonds repaid, due in large part to the shortfall features. And so we see through the years that there's going to be a good spot to handle a lot of those projects that are mentioned with those shortfall features. The prepaid refinance and build up balances keep rolling through the facilities that arrive.
One of the potential criticisms we had of the series 2021 losses, which they were all sold at one time, which is means that you start paying interest in May on those, and they're not earning the interest due to construction. If the project is going to require the expenditure of the construction fund right away, that would be a reasonable idea for selling all at once. But when we can't reinvest money, we found this better, like we did with the issue approved in 2017, was split into 3 pieces. And all of them called 5 years, and you're reaping the benefits of that right now. So that would be another point that we would make about our company. I feel appreciative of the fact that you're listening to what we have to say. We didn't have the opportunity to explain that when to the board back when you were taking proposals to end the relationship about a year ago. And we're wanting to use this chance that you've generously given us to lay it out. We think it was a good plan. We don't think it's a good idea to deviate from it because we still have a lot of needs to accomplish. And we can't help do any of it unless we are given that opportunity. I would say that the 30 years of the firm, and I've been in investment banking for more years than that, but of all the schools in the state, we have relationships with more than 300 of them. We have been very well accepted, starting with 2 people back in 1991. But one of my most meaningful participations in Normandy is just to be personally involved in a lot of different things, selling bonds and helping with elections, and we appreciate that. And we very much appreciate you, Mr. Humphrey, for arranging it so we can come before you tonight. We don't want to tire you beyond the point, so we would be very happy to address anything that you might want to ask
Okay. Ms. Williams, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions about any of this. I'll let you guys judge all of that. But Mr. Hart has not told you what is most important to me, which is investment in our children, not just financially. I tried to track back to a time when the Friends of Normandy didn't have any money to give the scholarships. Mr. Hart gave all of the scholarships in the first few years. After that, we continued to give. I have attempted to count up how much money he's actually given to the children of Normandy, and I stopped counting at about $189,000 over the years. You can see I get emotional about it because we have worked with hundreds of vendors over the years. Mr. Hart, to my knowledge, I've been here since 2004. To my knowledge, Mr. Hart is one of the few vendors who has given any return back to these children. Not only has he given financially, he's given personally. He hired a tutor for 4 young men he was going to send to college, pay their college tuition. Worked with them during the summer. He and his wife were personally involved with these young men. Mr. Hart became a mentor. I was going to say a big brother, but maybe a grandfather to these children. But he has really made a real financial and personal investment in the children of Normandy. And I want him thanks for that. I want to tell him how much we appreciate it, and I'll leave it alone after that.
Ron, do you have any questions?
Yeah, a couple questions. One, you had made a statement earlier about a flaw in our current program. Could you just repeat that? And what's the financial impact to us as a result of that?
72. So the series, 2017, we were 3 days, 2.3 million, and then saved 235,000. And so the total interest expense we made on the 296.75 that was not prepaid was 672,500, and those financings matured in 2026 through 2028. So they were maybe 31,000 cost additions. We have roughly 40,000 additions. So we restructured those from 26, 27, 28 up to 2023 to 24. You would have had to incur then $7,000 costs if you just prepaid that balance. There would have been no 31,000 cost additions, no $40,000 interest expense. You would have saved all 672,500 instead of
Yeah, just overall, you don't have to go. Yeah, just yeah, I see he's very thorough, but the 30,000 for the.
Your interest cost on 26.5 million is roughly 3.01%, the average rate of all those bonds. So that's what you began paying. That's the interest rate you started paying in May when they were issued. And that's about, you're probably earning, if you're earning 0.25%, I'd be surprised, but maybe you are earning more on those construction fund balances, but that's 3% times 26.5 million.
I think you answered it well. Yeah, I get it.
That's the point is that if you sell them all at once, you pay from the beginning, and if you phase it in and it matches the construction period, which we've done successfully the last several years, it's worked out better. You save interest costs,
Okay.
and that money piles up in the debt service account to speed up the process for the next.
Okay. So,
Builds on itself.
oh, thank you. So my follow-on to that, Dr. P, I thought when we, there was an analysis done for the process, and actually we benefited from that process. So are you getting data that supports what's said here or contradicts it?
First of all, I do want to echo Sheila's comments about Larry's support and generosity to the district and the Friends of Normandy. And when we presented on that, I wanted to make sure we pointed that out and that long history. When we selected and we interviewed multiple vendors, we analyzed each firm on a number of, we scored each firm on a number of areas, including fees, underwriter discount, capital, the financial strength of the firm, the greater the financial strength, the less exposure to higher rates, distribution, the ability to market bonds widely, the proposed rates in the relation to historic rates. I went to my mentor who won the Missouri, one mentor who won the Missouri CFO of the Year for Pattonville, the school district there. He said, you know, one of the best ways to measure when you're doing an RFP for bonds is to look at their proposed rates in the relation to historic rates, because that's the most expensive part of financing. You compare past issuances and their spread against the MMD, which is Thomson Reuters tracked high quality municipal bonds. It's kind of a sample, and you see how they performed against that. That's just a few, but on the scorecard that I emailed the board about it was a year ago tonight on November 9th, 2020, to come and share the scorecard of the evaluation. While we're super grateful for Larry and his time, the firm didn't win. And we gave an evaluation, we quantified it. We had a committee of a board member, superintendent, retired CFO, myself, Ms. Marsh, and it just turned out the way it did. Your question about the specifics, I called our current underwriter about to have an opinion, and he said, no, LJ Hart is misinformed. And in fact, their approach saved us $685,000, where their approach would have saved us $672,000. So in short, it's a wash, is what my current data says. I haven't done the deep dive with this just yet, but
okay. All right, thank you. And my last question, what are we supposed to take away from this?
Well, generally, I think one of the things we wanted to do was just to take a reflective look at where we are within our bond position, because there's a couple of things that I think he talked about, a couple of bonds that may be recallable, some smaller ones. But what we really wanted to do is fully understand what our current bond position is, because we have some unfinished projects here at the high school. And in order to be able to figure out how to address those through a taxing, well, first of all, let me back up for a minute. The fact that if my understanding is correct, the 26.5 million, which is callable within 7 years, which means we can't modify that loan for at least the next 7 years. So the question to us is, what are the ways that we can reasonably fund the additional work beyond the 29 million that's currently here? So we have to look at, if we're looking at a tax increase bond issue, we have to look at the climate in which we're trying to go to the community around that. But we also had to understand how our current bonds are structured, so we can know just what level of latitude we have when we're trying to find money to do that. So I thought it was important for two reasons. One, to do a reflective look where we could have a time to kind of look through the information. But secondly, I made the decision to allow Larry Hart to come simply because of the past relationship that he's had with the school district. And he asked for an opportunity to come to give a reflection on our current bond status. And I think the fact that he's worked with us for over 28 years, I felt I owed it to him because of that business relationship, to at least allow him to come to have this level of conversation. What I want us to get away from this conversation is that going forward with bonds, we have to make a very informed decision around how we get, first of all, can we get enough money to do the other $20 million worth of work at the football field and the other things that we've identified, or do we have to delay them for 7 years until we can get to a place that we can recall the 26.5 and restructure or pay off early? So that's the reason why I wanted us to hear this, so we can kind of take a look at where we've been and then take an intentional look about how do we go forward, or if we can go forward under the current bond environment to do the things that we want to do.
So my last part to that is, because I appreciate, you know, the information that we got, because actually it's been helpful, and I really appreciate you being a champion in this community. But there's a lot of questions that have come up, and the entity that we have under our current program, I think needs to be in a position where they should be able to address this or.
Absolutely.
So let's make sure we more quickly get to that point, because I think this was helpful. I think that, ongoing kind of dialogue like this and challenging the information that we have, but I think it causes more confusion if we can't have the people that are in the entity that is, responsible for this right now to answer some of these things that are being presented to us.
Right, and at the board's request, if we need Steve to come forward to explain our current bond position and anything else that needs to be, if that's the consensus of the board, we can make that happen, like at the next monthly meeting, to have him do a similar reflection for the board, because it's all about making an informed decision and making sure that we got all of the right, because at the end of the day, we got $29 million worth of projects going on here. We got another 20 million that we're trying to figure out if we can do it. So now we got to figure out what's the best path forward to try to get to that. Do we have to delay for 7 years, or is there something else that we can do incrementally that will still get us there, or do we have to delay that other construction? So that's the reason why I thought this conversation was important, and any other future conversations to make sure that we have the level of understanding that we need to have. I'll get that set up at the next meeting, and we'll have that conversation, because I think this is a very important conversation that we need to have. Yes, sir.
Our message to you is that from the strategy we developed, you're off track a little, but it's salvageable, in our opinion, with the refundings that are coming up and the growth that's occurring in your assessed valuation. And then in Kansas City, I mentioned it would be about 11 million in 24. That number is more likely to be 18 million that would be available within 2 years of the tax increase. So that's our message, is that we would like to be considered to, and we wanted you to understand the history of our involvement, what was the reasoning behind the approach, and then we wanted to say we can still take corrective action to bring it back, but that's it.
Right.
Okay.
Well, once again, does anyone have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that any future evaluation on this matter should be done in a very deliberate way, not in a presentation by presentation by presentation at a board meeting.
Okay.
Without an outline, without what our end goals are, and I think it should be led by Dr. Terry. I think we should have a rigorous way to assess this. I very much appreciate the long-term relationship with Normandy, but we've got to go through this in a deliberate and professional way. Everybody who wants to work with Normandy will come present what they have done for us and what they will do for us, and they will present all of the good things. They all get paid money. They all earn money off of doing business with Normandy, and all of this has to be evaluated at the same time with the same measures. That's what Phil was talking about when he said, here's how we evaluate things. So I think that while it's great to have Mr. Hart and his team members here presenting to us to represent the long-term relationship, now's not the time to evaluate this method versus someone else's method unless we've got a standard methodology for evaluation.
Okay. Point well taken. Any other comments? Valerie, you have anything?
I agree with Ms. Foster in the fact that if we're going to be fair and equitable, the measures need to be agreed upon with everyone, and there needs to be a set format, opposed to, as I said, I would go back to being the new kid on the block. So walking into this for the first time, I feel that it was a sales show. Let me come and defend my position because I didn't get selected. So I don't particularly care for those kind of presentations because I don't think they are necessarily inclusive or fair and equitable.
Yeah.
Mr. President, my comments are a little bit of a departure, just in that I think there's a precedent issue before us, which is, and hats off to LJ Hart Company, because the framework really was theirs to say, if you really need to accomplish that much in such a short period of time, a tax levy is really the only way you arrive at that. So they created the framework for Proposition T. And so one of the things I think is before us, not to be solved tonight or even at the next meeting, is this question of what are the right conditions, what are the right circumstances around either returning to a Proposition T or putting that to bed. So I do believe that that as a board, there has to be some conversation around what our near-term commitments might be. Again, not next month, not the following month. I'm not talking about the April ballot by any stretch of imagination, but I do think that that's before us to contemplate, because while there are many projects here at the high school, there's still many projects that are around the district that affect our couple thousand elementary kids as well. So I appreciate this framework, and I think we have to keep talking and educating ourselves about how we make sure that all of our kids get access to great spaces.
Mr. President, we as a board should have a conversation around it, but we have to respond to credible, factual information and not speculation.
Okay.
So, this is, we have a public audience, it's causing more questions. I think we do have to be in a position where we get information led by Dr. Phil, and to make sure that we get information to respond and react to. We have too many things going on as a board to have conversations around conjecture and speculation.
Okay. If there's no other questions, thank you very much for coming. Next up, we have 8.04 MSIP 5 update. You can go ahead and frame it like this.
Oh, okay. We appreciate Mr. Miller for his great work, and Dr. Floyd for assisting on the MSIP 5 update. One of the things that Mr. Humphrey has been pushing for is some serious consideration around what it takes for us to return to full accreditation. And while our assessment for being fully accredited will be under MSIP 6, and that's coming, Mr. Humphrey felt, and I agree, that looking at the old framework at least helps us to have a pulse check on whether or not we're on the road to where we need to get to, or at least highlight some of the issues that are present before us. And so with that said, Mr. Miller.
Good evening, board and committee members. Great to be here tonight. As Ms. Robinson spoke in, I have been updating on the Missouri School Improvement Program. This is a really important program that determines our accreditation, and there was a request just for an updatation deadline on the site. I do this information to you. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me or quick overview. So the Missouri School Improvement Program has been around for quite some time, and there has been multiple iterations. The whole policy goals around this are to make sure that our students are ready for college and careers. It's also to distinguish performance for schools and districts, and to promote continuous improvement. And this is basically lays out the statuses or key measures that they're looking at when we talk about accreditation. Got it. So the MSIP 5 performance standards, there are 5 standards that DESE is looking at when they are viewing accreditation standards. So the first standard that they're looking at is academic achievement. So that is how our 3rd through 8th graders do on the MAP and how our high schoolers do on the end of course assessment. The next group that they're looking at are subgroup academic achievement. Now for Normandy, the first and the second standards are identical because 100% of the points fall in line as a subgroup, either a student of color or students of low income or students with disabilities. So those 2 scores are exactly the same for us, but for other districts, it's basically a measure to make sure that all kids are learning at appropriate levels. The next performance standard is college and career readiness. And this is determined pretty much 100% at the high school level. This looks at the number of students taking the ACT, SAT, ASMAT, and other standardized tests, and it sees not only if they take it, how they do, and also dual credit and assessments. And there is a metric to measure all this stuff. The next one is attendance, and there is the 90-90 rate that you are probably familiar with. And so what the state is measuring, or what they're hoping for, is that 90% of the students will be present 90% of the time. And that's a metric that's really important for our accreditation status. And then lastly is they are looking at our graduation rates. So the MSIP performance standards, they look at all of these things, and they're also looking for improvement over time. So this has been a big change that has occurred over the last 2 years. So our APR, our annual performance report, no longer calculates points or percentages of points. So when we were being deemed unaccredited and were fighting to get provisional accreditation, we were looking at these numbers with the X's at it all the time because we were having to hit specific metrics to ensure that we were going up. That is no longer the case, and it's a really big change. And so we're not playing as much of a game, specifically trying to get percentage to go up by this much or get performance to go up by this much. Now APR, what the state is doing is they're taking a more holistic approach, and they're just looking at our scores over time, and there's not hard things put in place that we must measure. So here's what this is the old APR report. So here is our most current APR report, and this is actually from 2019. So you can see it still measures the 5 areas, but it looks completely different, and there are no sort of percentage points there. And I know that if you look at the screen, you can see that the little triangle or the blue line is where Normandy is currently at, and the triangle is our state average. So this last slide was 2019. So there was no 2020 because of the pandemic. And so what we are doing is we are trying to forecast how we're going to do with 2021 projections. This is not official, but this is where it looks like we potentially could end up. So you can see we have our scores over time, and the white is like the 2018, red is 2019, and then the green is our projected 2021 MAP scores and EOC scores. We didn't put up performance standard 2 because it mirrors the graph from performance standard 1. Performance standard 3 are college and career ready scores. And you can see the pandemic has also affected this, and this goes back. We do have 4 years of data for this because we still measured this in 2020. Moving right along for performance standard 4, attendance. Last year we increased quite a bit in attendance due to probably the fact that we had virtual attendance. But before that, we were holding steady at around 75% of our students were here 90% of the time. And that's what that's measuring, the percentage of students here who are here 90% of the time. And then the last graph is illustrating our 4, 5, 6, and 7-year graduation rates. And so I know it is color-coded in a way to try to help understand kind of what's going on. And so if you look at 2021, the green bar, at the 4-year mark, if you look over to the right, it's not there because we don't know the 5-year graduation rate. It will only go up in time. And so you can follow a cohort. And what DESE is doing is they're looking to see how many percentage of your kids have graduated in 4 years, and then how many in 5 years, and then how many in 6 years, hoping it will go up. So they do give us additional points if we keep graduating the kids and don't just say, oh, you know, too bad for you. So with all of these MSIP performance measures in place, Normandy, the leadership team, is concerned and focused on data and making database decisions. And so what we have is we have created a dashboard to help administrators make informed decisions and also find trends in problem area. So here is just a quick example of the dashboard that administrators can utilize. And so it does give, and you can see some of the trends that occur within schools, within grades, for attendance, for MAP scores, and also for discipline. And so the point of this wasn't to go into that data right now, but to show you the tool that administrators are using. In addition to this simple Google Doc, we also have an Excel dashboard created that shows a plethora of information for the deep dives around data that our administrators are asking and utilizing to make changes. This is just an example. You can see there are multiple tabs with schools. That way, any questions people have, we can try to get to the bottom of it to help them out with growth. So more or less in conclusion, so MSIPS 5's effect on NSC's accreditation status. So now, and this is really the big change, is we are not after some specific measure where we have to get our students up to 80% attendance. DESE is using multiple years of growth or decline in order to change an accreditation status. Another big change, just to help people understand, is that APR score is no longer calculated. Now there's trends over time. And then the very last thing just to know is that MSIP 6 is coming. So there is going to be additional changes in the way that schools are held accountable and the performance reports that are published each year. And as those changes come, we will be updating board leadership, making sure everybody understands the metrics that we're being measured on. Do you have any questions?
Sheila, any questions?
No. Have some of those things been published? So we can't look at what's out there now against what we currently have.
So the 2018-2019 data has been published. Our 2021 MAP scores have not been published and released. The state has released their average scores statewide.
Yeah, no, I was speaking more about the standards.
Oh, yes.
They've been approved already, right?
So they have, it is right now, it's all in narrative form, talking about the changes, you know, and what they're looking at in a more holistic, but there's no sort of like hard numbers, calculations, changes. But yes, they've actually already released a document of approved changes of what they're planning to put in place, looking at quite a bit more metrics other than just the kind of the 5 hard areas, more quantitative than qualitative in the future.
Ronnie, any questions? Thank you. Tony, any questions?
Yeah, I think it was answered. I was wondering whether M66, that was going to be our question. You answered that. Thank you.
Sarah?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the state's approach to, I don't know, 2020, the learning that was lost in 2020, the impact on 2021 and years beyond that, and when they're going to be looking at performance over time, that clearly has an impact on our performance over time. All schools suffered as a result of the pandemic. The great experiment where we sent kids home and still tried to teach them wasn't so great for everyone. So there were, learning declines, there were emotional declines, there were a lot of things that declined. And so when you start looking at our scores over time, did we lose more on average than other schools, or did other districts go down about the same that we did for 2021? Or how do we compare ourselves, and how do we mitigate what has happened to us? How do we build on this so that our kids don't suffer for longer than is necessary? Lots of questions there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we don't know how other districts have done yet because it's not public record.
But in general.
Right. So we're obviously, the state saw a big decline, and I think Mr. Robinson can probably talk more, or Dr. Floyd, about how we are going to be held accountable for the 2020 year and going forward. There are, and this is a big part of the MSIP 6, is that growth is a big deal. Also, in the way that they measure growth is through an NCE score. And what they do is they actually compare a kid over time, and then all kids have an expected growth rate. And if our kids are growing faster than the expected growth rate, we get additional points or, kind of honor for that. That being stated, like, I can't answer how the state is going to go forward with standardized testing in the future, using it to hold districts accountable. You want to add on anything, or?
Yeah, other than agree. I think it's going to be a challenging measurement, as you brought up, because the learning loss in urban districts nationally is being seen as greater than in other school districts, primarily because of home life that wasn't conducive to learning. I mean, you had a few students who were self-driven who may have done well, but those students were few and far between. So overall, Normandy, consistent with national data, is showing that it didn't work out for those students. One of my greatest concerns now are seniors, and how do we get seniors through the finish line, because they did lose so much during that 18 months, not only academically but socially. It's like, how do we close those gaps and get those kids graduated by May? So that's one of the heavy lifts that we're working on now, and trying to develop some systems with the teacher shortage and some of the other things the district is going through. It's like, how do we close those gaps? So, and part of my role, those are the things that are keeping me up at night.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's just a huge challenge for all districts, but in Normandy, we were already looking uphill, if you look at the history of our MAP testing, you look at where we were, we had a very aggressive plan to move forward in a big way, and then we have the pandemic, but it's a lot to overcome.
Us research nerds say we have to do disruptive innovations. Yeah. So what innovations can we do to make up for that huge disruption? And I'm still working on it.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Is some of that virtual learning stuff that we approved this evening, is that helpful?
I believe it will be. I believe it will be, as we begin to give students other ways to approve or to achieve their outcomes. Yeah, so we can, and we can monitor that, as you said.
Well, and I think it was really important for us to start to have this conversation, because as I had told Marcus earlier, to me, this is a pivoting point for the district, because from May up until now, we've been dealing with a lot of the stuff that makes schools work, but not as much attention around academics. And so every month we need to talk about something related to academics to help drive the needle to further our understanding, because you have a great deal of learning loss that's occurred on top of the loss that was already there. And so the last thing, we cannot afford to have a year that students don't get at least 1 year of growth, because when you're behind, if you don't get at least 1 year of growth, you slide further behind. And that's why we had talked about earlier, if there was ways of using ESSER funds to do some other kinds of things to support student academics, those are the kinds of things that we need to do. Valerie, did you have any questions?
I think my only question is around, yes, student first, academics, but what are we doing around mental health?
Well, I guess one of the things, one of the meeting before, the superintendent had brought some data to be able to show us the level of student engagement in terms of discipline. And the board has charged him to look into community resources that will help with that whole mental health piece. So at this point, we're just waiting on him to frame the discussion and bring it back to us to let us know what that plan is. So we're hoping to hear something sooner rather than later, because the problem won't go away unless we attend to it. So do we have any other discussions or comments? And I think one of the things that I did, on your desk, you'll actually find a copy of the strategic plan that I gave everyone. At your leisure, just start to look through that, because it's a 5-year plan, and as a board, we need to be very intentional around what do we want to have focused on in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So I ask that you take a look at that, and probably next month or the coming month, we're going to have some discussions around what do the priorities look like coming out of strategic plan from a board standpoint, because the superintendent will have goals that he's working on relative to us seeing his level of effectiveness around the work. But I think as a board, we should also carve out some things that we need to have attention given to as we're driving the work from the strategic plan. At this point, the next item up, if we don't have any other discussion, thank you very much for the presentation. Next item up is 8.05, which is an update from the Middle School Exploration Committee.
So, Mr. Humphries, you had mentioned that you wanted some additional discipline data for this month. So we're going to take a minute or two out of that middle school presentation and talk about some of the trends that we're seeing. Back there.
I know. Research presentations. Yeah, can you go back to the previous presentation?
Well, he was saying.
He was, yeah.
Oh.
I think if you just minimize
I just saw it and then it went away.
Yeah, now we're okay. Okay.
There we go.
So again, we've been looking at discipline data across the district, and specifically for this, for tonight, we looked at some of the middle school issues. We're still in the same place we were last month with discipline issues, the majority at the high school. But if you disaggregate the data, you scroll down something. You scroll down for me. If you disaggregate data, so the biggest issues are actually with 8th graders. If you look at all the elementals combined, and if you think about what Ms. Foster said, those students left school as a 6th grader and came back as an 8th or 9th grader. So from the research I'm doing, they lost socialization skills, which are negatively impacting their academics and their social experiences at school, which is one of our challenges. And we do have a committee together that is looking at mental health supports for our students and for our families. So the data is broken down by location, types of incidents, even the times of incidents. And so if you want some further information about this after tonight, we'll gladly provide that to you because we are looking at discipline.
Yeah, at lunch and after lunch.
The children's services fund, don't we still have agencies working with the school district? We had about 2 of them or so. Who knows? Nobody.
Ms. Mark. She asked, was the Children's Services Fund still working as one of our partners?
No, ma'am. Okay. They'd be a good resource for mental health. That's why we're paying taxes to pay for those agencies. So their services.
Can you put that down, Alex, and we can follow up. You want to pull that other slide up?
I think they're probably gonna do it over there.
Oh, you're gonna do it up here?
Yeah.
We're ready.
There's also another program called Handle with Care.
They have no controller.
So we put together a middle school task force, and I'll give you the dimensions of it at the end of the presentation. We're going to look at where our communities need better support at the middle school level. So what we're doing is using some quantitative and qualitative data, or as I call it, surveys and studies, to look at the decision to move to elemental, and also look at peer-reviewed literature around what's best for urban communities. And also, I've added in, how did COVID negatively affect middle school students? What are we doing to make sure that's comparable in decisions that we make for them? I made sure the research we're doing for the task force is aligned with our strategic plan, 1A and 1B. Culture produces the learning through our routines and systems, and also 2A, B, and C. Availability of services for those students, trauma-informed and cultural responses, pedagogy. We know that middle school students have huge social emotional supports and needs, and we need to address those. And because of COVID, they experience social traumas that we don't understand. But looking at actual research, I mean, come see the routine with Normandy or about our plans and routines nationally. Previously, when the decision was made to go to elemental, from what I understand, introduced in the survey, there's some serious disciplinary problems with the middle school. There were challenges in building relationships between 7th and 8th graders, so by the time the teachers and staff got to know the students, they were ready for even for high school. There were some struggles integrating both our four schools into one building. School location created transportation issues, and the physical structure wasn't conducive for middle school learning or emotional development. One of the challenges that they put those things were struggling with the building into the buildings that were designed for elementary school students. I think I was reading today that the world was designed for 1 through 3, and we had 6'4" middle school students in that space with 1'1" kindergarten, first grade, which bothers me. Some of the current challenges that we're seeing are that, and I take parent complaints at the district level, so I get these every day. Transportation sharing with first graders and middle school students that little kids are experiencing bullying. Their exposure to language and actions that puberty has, and they're not being very role models. We're also experiencing human resource staffing struggles because teachers need emotional certifications as we have math teachers, science, and we're moving teachers around. So we need to continuity education because of the teacher shortage. The test scores did increase as expected. We're having shared spaces between grade level, and transitioning in shared spaces is challenging. And parents, as I said, parents concerns about daily about the elementary school student exposure to school. We're about to go down to the graph. Okay. So this graph, you see 2015, 16, 17.
You just passed it again. Okay.
Shows that we were making considerable progress in actually, so this is when the 7 8 figures were there, and you can see the last year, 2019, there was a drop off, but still the current levels of 2021, we are not back to the levels that we were at. We were making consistent growth in the middle school. There were issues with the structure of the building, and we were
think the hope of the administration time was to absolutely shoot way up, but that's definitely not been the case.
So, again, we know a lot of research around post middle school model, especially for urban students. Academic progress of teachers, one of the things we're having now is, because we have a teacher shortage, we need math and science. Whereas we had middle school math and science all in one building, they could sort of support each other more easily to help students with those struggles. Culture, music, dance, and sports. Because we don't have programming in the middle school, it's hurting the high school in terms of culture, sports, music. We have a band with 12 members at the high school level. If we had a middle school band, then we would feel that culture is okay to be in a band, right? By the time we get to high school, you know, it's like nervous if we don't say at the middle school level, we're going to have a band. Middle school learners have it will be easier to service in one deal, improve the effects of brains and psychosocial development to have space to be specific, to address those logistics like field trips or implementing programs, partnerships. If we want to have partnerships with businesses and colleges to support our students, they have to go to like 4 different buildings to support those students. We need a better focus on high school preparation. I'm looking at GPA and we do need a better focus on high school preparation. The high school has had some time after having no option. About effective urban. So again, this is research around effective urban. It's all easy to do with one thing. The environment is inviting, inclusive, and supportive. We're dealing with population needs, or definitely more than half greater than across the country. And so we need to back those advocates. It's easier to tell those advocates, and mentors that will meet you at the middle school to address the needs. Instead of having them all spread around specific guidance services for middle school students, again, more culture and climate issues that they deal with, get families involved, make sure that community and businesses are involved in learning to provide in one more. Successful urban middle school research indicates that students like math and science engaged and respectful in the learning environment that allows students in one space. Again, we can address the psychosocial factors, the perspectives of the school, and the last one is the staff well-trained and dedicated teachers is an essential component of an effective middle school. The next slide is some of the different emotional developments that we use to make the original decision, and I feel the research shows for urban middle school students, these things would be addressed better in one respect. Next slide. So our current reality. I will get to our practice. Our practice has a theory around how we change that practice, but now it's revisiting those theories and putting urban into the variables. We've learned that physical spaces are important in our physical schools that are basic design for 1 through 3. Elementary schools are not designed to accommodate they're bigger now. They're taller, they're wider, and it's funny to see those little chickens. Instead of adapting to student challenges, like we do an elementary, which isn't the best space for kids, according to my research. Some of the ideas around neighborhood schools is a great idea, but our students are in constant transition where they're moving from school to school anyway. Having specific middle school, we could better serve their needs. In the design of the elemental, a lot of ideas that didn't materialize. I can blame some of that on COVID or planning or staffing issues, but it's supposed to be a STEAM curriculum, sports, transportation, and our students are missing out on it. And we all know that keep urban kids engaged in something other than academic or before actually fighting to get to school. Human resource realities that have teacher education, challenges, administrative challenges, realistic teacher retention and recruiting, or some of the other challenges. Mr. Miller can talk about some of the losses with close of
So this is the idea that our middle school principals for 3 years, and understood a lot of things for the transition. But now that there is no middle school, our students have lost out on a lot of things that were really going well there, that just got lost in the shuffle of the trends of change. So we had a newspaper that won multiple awards. We had a farm interact. We had gifted classes that really met the needs of middle school learners. We had great sports teams to get around, social celebration, the dance, and all the things that made middle school special for us were happening. Some of the things that were easier to have, like age-based assemblies and language, because all of the middle schoolers were in one place. So when we did shuffle, a lot of these really special programs just got lost in the mix.
In conclusion, we want a bit more in our staff, so we'll continue with the task force to look at ways to start a middle school course. The last thing talks about how our task force is broken up, gender, speed, and everybody can find a specific role. I'm working on surveys of parents and teachers and students, which I think will be important, and hopefully the next month we'll have that data available for you. Any questions?
Jill, any questions? Ron, any questions?
I just wish we had more time to dig a little deeper into this information. I really appreciate it. Just a comment. I'm one of those people that grew up in Normandy, matriculated from 1st grade through 8th grade, went to the junior high school, but had to put my parents on probation because they sent me to another school and I really wanted to go to Normandy. But some of the ills or some of the challenges that started to evolve in the early 80s, mid to late 80s, they're even more pronounced now. So, but we did have that environment of the junior high, as we called it, to deal with some of our growth issues from 7th and 8th grade. But I think this is what I'm hearing is that this information is going back towards the middle school as opposed to the elemental model. Is that what we're kind of presenting this data to build the case for? Okay.
And we will have greater details and more time. I know I was trying to do this for days, but we have a lot of different projects and we'll have to provide more information.
I appreciate it. And my last comment is that in prior board meetings, we talked about buildings that we have in our inventory, obsolescence, capital improvements, and it's impacted by, what do we do with a specific building as its impact is directly related to this middle school elemental model. So, and I recall there was going to be some information. Is this part of that where we're going to figure out what we actually are going to do as far as this middle school model, and then that's actually going to impact some major expenditures that we have as far as schools that can be better utilized? Is that kind of what's happening here?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, trying to make a decision about how we serve kids in the middle helps us to understand a growing elementary population and what we need to think about relative to their facilities. Sarah Foster hit us with a hard one at the last meeting because she said, what have you done to really research effective elementals and what lessons do we have to learn from that? And I took that seriously. and really tried to dig in to figure out who was running a K-8 scenario where this play was going well. And what Dr. Floyd and I found out trying to research it was this was an idea that was gaining some steam, but never really made any serious penetration in an urban setting. We found it difficult to find an exemplar at the K-8 level serving urban kids. Even when we try to dig into Chicago, that has K-8s all the way through, their most effective schools were magnet schools. They weren't traditional schools. So our orientation is toward trying to figure out a way to really support a rigorous high school program by saving the kids in the middle who we cannot stop from showing up 2 or 3 grade levels behind, given the transients we're going to have from district to district. We're going to keep inheriting kids. And so we have to have a middle level program that is an academic safety net. So what we're trying to explore is what is the right approach to that, bring to the board then what we think might be the right way to save kids in the middle, especially as we are dealing with a crisis. Now, as everyone has seen the news, kids coming back with problematic behaviors is not new. It's not idiosyncratic to Normandy by any stretch of imagination. It's a little tougher for us when an 8th grader slaps a bus driver and then throws a book and hits a first grader in the head with a book. It tips off a whole series of conversation as to why we put certain behaviors in front of our smallest kids. What are the dividends for us, especially when we're not actually seeing great academic growth? So we can't really say to those parents, yeah, but the big kids are growing as a consequence. So our orientation is to try to find a way to present this that might meet the needs of all the kids in the district.
Any other questions?
So I went back, and I got this girl that we wrote again, in 2017, when we made a decision to move to that. And there are models of similar K-8 programs. I don't know how many are current right now, but what's interesting is that the same things that we're saying about the current environment, we said about the previous environment. We said the same thing. We said the 7th and 8th graders, all those hormones going crazy, all those kids in one place, it's causing too many problems. And if we distribute them, they'll be the role models in the school. So they'll be the kids that, in the right environment, they'll be the kids that look up to.
So we said they'd be the kids that the little ones would look up to and want to be like. Now, keep in mind that I'm hearing my echo across the room. Keep in mind that, really, we got to turn that down. Okay, so that we did this, we made this decision in the fall of 2017. We implemented it in the fall of 2018. We mashed a plan together to make that deadline work because we had construction deadlines. And so what I would ask is whether we really had a fully baked plan for that transition. I would also say that some of the models in this research showed that a slower transition, a modified, you don't go all at once. We went all at once. So you gradually add a grade, but the whole point is you cut out that transition. You cut out one period of transition that kids go through where they also lose learning when they make that transition in a school move. So I would say we should question our plan, our transition plan, and if we did a job that was an appropriate job to get kids ready for that new model. Did we prepare the teachers the way we should have prepared the teachers? Did we say, do we have the right classrooms? Did we do all of those things? And there are K through 8 models that work. And I can pull, like I said, I didn't go back and find the current status of all of these programs, but they're out there. And I think part of it is in the planning and the implementation and the resources that you give it to make it successful. So you can make a middle school successful, you can make an elemental successful. It's planning the right aspects of that change, going through the change management process and getting it right. So
I agree. I went back and reviewed every piece of documentation from the city that I could, and I would say there was some great plans and poor implementation. As far as just making a decision and throwing sixth graders, seventh graders, eighth graders into a space without scaffolding, without support mechanisms, without teacher training, without administrator training, without feedback from administrators on how will this impact the way that I run a building. So I'm not saying that, and I didn't see any way that it was looked at in an urban setting or matched with districts who had some of the challenges, like Normandy does. But I did find that there were so many culture issues that was a way to help deal with culture issues. And as you know, we created a whole code of conduct where some of the things that were happening at middle school just wouldn't be acceptable.
Any other questions? I guess the only question I have, I know as you're doing the research around the middle school task force, at what point do you anticipate come back with a final report relative to recommendations about what direction we should consider?
My plan was to look at graders in this semester so I can actually take them back. I don't know if that's realistic, and I don't know if that's enough evidence, but next month I should have a more clear answer for you.
I can have you for February, March, because our goal is really just to suggest this is what the data says how you should go. But what we want to present to you is a fully baked middle school plan with implementation strategies, such that it would be something that you could have confidence in. You'd be able to read through the documents and see exactly how this middle school would play on a day-to-day basis, how we would staff it, what programs we would build around it, etc., and the costs associated with it. So I would say February at the earliest, March at the latest. If we can't get to you by March, then it probably can't go live for the next school year, because as Sarah pointed out, like, there are busing concerns in redistricting that can't get accomplished if we can't get this done by late winter, early spring. So we know what our marching orders are, and we're not going to come to you with something that is half put together. We're going to have a fully fleshed school model for your perusal.
Redirect one question in terms of community involvement in this plan. I couldn't tell from your list how we're engaging with the community on this, because we moved them around. We moved all the kids around not too long ago.
That was one of the concerns I had. And as you said, it justified somewhat, and then we have to justify.
We're messing with families' lives here. And so do we owe it to ourselves to say, what do we need to do the right things for our current environment? How do we gradually shift back to something else if we think that's the right answer? But to shift again in, so 18, 19, 4 years later, now maybe some of the kids have moved on, some of them are at the high school now, whatever the case may be, but we're messing with family schedules, family lives.
And I definitely understand that. And I'm really looking at the lens of, as you mentioned before, like the learning model. Like, how can we, from the research I read, they call middle school the Bermuda Triangle, right? So they're either go this way or that way in those critical formative years. So what's the best way to serve our families in
families who were already behind. What's our best way to catch those families up academically and socially?
Let me also say that I don't think this works unless you have hundreds of kids and families who support it. So this isn't just how does the staff play, it really is how does the community respond with support or alliance. So if we can't get hundreds of families to say this is the right move, then it's the wrong move. And it takes the time to take in order to either explain it to them or do something different. So that to me is like a pivotal part of the presentation that has to come before you. Not just what's the plan, but what is the level of support from the community for this.
Right, and getting broad feedback, not just a dozen.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, community input is absolutely essential.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and I guess with that, with that being the case, as you're doing that research, you said you were going to do some surveys. So I think pulling that parent conversation in as a part of that, because at the end of the day, whatever we do we should always do what's in the best interest of children. And I know that at the time that I wasn't here when the elemental decision was made, but I was here during part of the time where there was a 7th and 8th grade center, and I did see what the school culture looks like. And from a culture standpoint, I understand why it was done that way. Because like I said, as I was thinking about schools in the area, the only school right now I can think in the county that has a K-8 is actually Remington Traditional in Pattonville. And a lot of times I think part of the thinking was when you keep that 1-8 structure, because elementary is so much more structured than middle school, it would hope to hold down some of that adolescent energy that was present in the middle school. But I think, as you said, if we take a complete look at what's in the best interest of kids, if the middle school model is where we need to go, or we just need to understand where we are, where we need to go, and what makes the most sense. So with that being the case, we thank you very much for your presentation, and we do look forward to future outcomes. Now, the next item on the agenda is actually ill-placed, and I didn't catch it. 8.01 should have actually been under consent agenda. And part of the issue is this. When I first came onto the board, June 1, I started having some conversation with MSBA relative to the policies that should currently be in place. And they told me that there was somewhere between 20 to 30 different policies for various reasons that hadn't gone through the complete approval cycle. This just happens to be one of those policies. And so going forward, right now, I've actually asked them to scrub the list of policies so we could see if there were policies that were approved, but just MSBA, for whatever reason, didn't get the notification. We want to make sure that we get all of the policies that we need to have in place as quickly as we can. So that's a process we're going through right now. So what I would ask the board to do, I would ask a motion just to adopt this policy. Can I get a motion? Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that policy BDD, which is board policy of members with excessive absence, would be approved. And in the coming weeks, we look to get those other policies reviewed and get those before. All those in favor? Excuse me, yes, ma'am, question.
How does it work? It just says that if the board isn't pleased or something, I mean, is there a vote or is there a?
Well, basically, what the
Can you actually remove an elected person from the board? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, at this point, the policy, it just says that the policy said if there was a board member with excessive absenteeism, that the board secretary would have to investigate it to certify if in fact there was a vacancy. And because we're on an appointed board, I'm sure we would have to go back to DESE to say, here's the situation. If we were to meet that situation, we would make a recommendation to them based on the facts that are in front of us. So.
I think the policy ought to say that I'll get more of or it should be accompanied by a procedure or something.
Okay,
what? This is too broad to me.
Well, I tell you what, we can easily table that, and if I guess at this point you were working with the policy service, or you'll continue to work with that, Okay, well, with that being the case, I'd ask that you withdraw that motion. Let's allow this to go back to the policy committee and any other information that needs to come with it. So when it comes back, it'll have the other pieces that she's suggesting. So I don't want it to be half-baked, but I do want us to be very intentional around what we're doing. So I appreciate that information. So, so if you would be so kind to just, who made the motion? Is it okay to? All right then. Thank you for giving it back to me. At this point, we move it back to the policy committee, and we'll deal with it at a future date. At this point, 9.01 budget amendment.
Every couple months, I bring before you a revision to the budget. This fiscal year is unlike just about any other because last year was a big pandemic year with most of our students not on staff and budget, not on site, and expenditures very different from prior years. So in short, we didn't really know what to expect this year with regard to expenses. So we bring this to you every couple months so you can see the changes to the budget as they occur and have an opportunity to ask questions. Revenue and with this amendment, in general, the main inclusion is the Opportunity Trust's gift. We see an increase in the gift section. Expenses, the main changes to these, there's all the major expenses over 50,000 are listed here in terms of changes. Much of this has to do with salary, and the board has been very supportive of trying to make sure that we are appropriately benchmarked with our staff. We recognize the need to attract and retain staff, and there have been changes to make sure that we're compensating our team well. And with the salary changes comes benefits changes. Those are the major reasons for these items listed. I can go through them one by one if you'd like, but I also am happy to just answer any questions that you may have, and I can give you more detail on any single item. All this equates to a revised end-of-year fund balance projection. At this time, we're looking at about 20.7%. So again, we're in pretty solid shape, still down about 5% from last year, and that is not yet looking into our ESSER 3 money. Any questions?
Sheila, any questions?
Right, all the way through into 24.
Ron, any questions?
No questions.
Tony, any questions? Sarah, any questions? Valerie, any questions? All right, at the next point, we're at board comments. I want to take a quick minute if I could. Last week, I had an opportunity to attend the Missouri School Boards Association in Kansas City. That was November 4th through the 6th. And I had a chance to attend a number of really interesting sessions that I think over time that will be beneficial. Plus, I've met a number of different individuals and start to forge some good relationships. But the sessions I attended best practices for high-performing boards, aligning your core work, negotiating superintendent contracts, rural and small school issues, the Zoom speaker series, sparking parent engagement, the future of ESAs and school choice. I also attended the 30th anniversary of Hardin Associates, attended the Stiefel dinner, went to the second General Assembly where it was Gene Becker, Chief of Staff to former President George Herbert Walker Bush, and she was a graduate of Community R6 School. Went to the third General Assembly, which was a celebration of stars. James Young, a music teacher from Ferguson, Florida, was selected as Teacher of the Year. And then Dr. Curtis Kane, Superintendent of Winsfield, was selected as Superintendent of the Year. And then the entertainment for the event was comedian Greg Warren, who's a graduate of Kirkwood School District. I also had an opportunity to have meetings with Mike Fulton, former Superintendent Pattonville, Larry Hardin Associates, Joyce Roberts, President of the St. Louis Public School Boards. I met members from Ladue, Kirkwood, Ferguson, Florissant, Hillsdale, and a number of places. One of the things I brought for each of the board members is a copy of their packet guide to give you a sense of the kind of programs that they do offer. The next conference is going to be November the 3rd through the 6th in Kansas City. And I would ask that all board members plan now to attend because it's really a good opportunity for board members to engage with folks around the state. And it also, you know, when you have multiple board members, you can actually attend more sessions and we can bring back more information. So from that standpoint, I would ask you to consider that for next year because I think just based on the quality of the presentations and the program that was there, I think it's worthwhile. Any other comments? Valerie, as a new board member, you got anything for us? Okay, Sarah, you got anything? No. Tony? No. Ron?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge on October the 28th, I had a chance to attend celebrating academic achievers here in this wonderful place we have here. And I was very, very inspired to see how the staff, administrators, teachers put on an event and how the students responded. Even the new uniforms, they look great. I think they were even more excited when they learned that they were getting hoodies. That was even exciting too. But I just want to commend everyone who had involvement in that. Mrs. Bullard, Mr. Foster, Dr. Barnes, Dean Crockett, Dean Tompkins, Dr. Stockman, and the young lady who played Miss Brown. I think her name is Donatika Brown. And lastly, the energy that Dr. Barnes provided in presenting to those students was amazing. I haven't been that inspired in quite some time. And I was more inspired by the students and the teachers and the faculty that put on this event than they were acknowledgement of a board member there. So I encourage the superintendent and everyone to let us know about this. And when we do find out about it, I encourage the board members to attend because it's really inspiring. And I commend you for your efforts.
Okay. One of the things I do want to do for the next board meeting, I want us to have under board operations, I want us to have some conversation around how do we build more effective community engagement at the board level. So I do have some suggestions of things that we can do to kind of move that forward, but I want you to be thinking about that so next month we can start to address that and kind of carve that out. At this point, we're at the end of the agenda. We do need to, Sheila, did you have any comment? I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to say.
I thought I went already down to that's me.
Just welcome to Ms. Pat, that's all.
Okay.
So happy to have you.
And sorry about that. That was an oversight on my part. At this point, we're at the end of the agenda, but I would ask that we would have a motion. We would have a roll call vote to go into executive session for personnel because one of the items that we moved from the agenda was the human resources audit. And so we need to move that into executive session to have that conversation. So by roll call vote, Sheila Williams?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
William, yes. Tony?
Yes.
Sarah? Yes. Valerie? Okay, we're now in executive session. Let's take a 5-minute recess. So if you need to attend.